Hi, my dears. Tonight's story is about Layla, a dutiful daughter pushed into a marriage that neither heart could survive, and Soraya, the woman who taught her that wanting is not a sin to bury. Because sometimes love begins when obedience finally gives way to truth. My mother told me about Tariq Haidari on a Thursday evening while the onions were softening in the pan and the kitchen window had gone gray with rain. I remember the steam rising against the glass, and I remember her saying his name as if she had placed something precious between us. Tariq, she said, a good family, Afghan British, respected, educated, 30, steady, polite, decent. His mother had asked after me. My mother spoke with that tender carefulness she used when she wanted me to think I was being invited rather than led. She stirred the onions as she talked, her bangles slipping down her wrist, her face soft with purpose. I loved her face. Even then, while something cold lowered itself inside me, I loved the evidence of all she had carried. My mother had crossed countries and languages and private griefs I would never fully understand. She had loved me with food, ironed uniforms, and phone calls that began with, "Have you eaten?" and ended with, "Be careful." That was the cruelty of it, though I did not have that sentence yet. The pressure came wrapped in love, and so refusing it felt like refusing the hands that had fed me. She did not say, "What are you waiting for?" She did not say, "What is wrong with you?" She did not say, "You are 26 and people are asking." Instead, she said, "We only want to see you settled." Settled. I had heard that word all my life, and it had always sounded less like peace than like dust, a thing settled when it stopped moving. I stood by the counter with a tea towel in my hands and saw the life opening in front of me. The visits, the flat chosen by other people, the polite mornings with a man I could learn to be kind to, the children everyone would begin mentioning before my henna faded, the slow burial of whatever unnamed part of me still lifted its head when a woman on the bus smiled or tucked her hair behind her ear. I had spent years teaching that part of myself not to speak. I had pressed it down with prayer, work, obedience, and the ordinary exhaustion of being the daughter who did not make trouble. By then, silence had become so familiar it felt like character. My mother waited. The onions hissed. My younger brother laughed in the front room, life continuing without me. I opened my mouth and said yes, not with joy, not even with surrender exactly. With the weary accuracy of someone signing for a delivery she had not ordered, but was told had her name on it. My mother closed her eyes for half a second, relief passing over her face so nakedly that it hurt me. She kissed my forehead. "May Allah put blessing in it," she whispered, and the part of my chest that had gone quiet went quieter still. Later, I told Hannah in the back corner of a cafe near Whitechapel Station. Hannah had never been the kind of friend who grabbed your wrist and told you to run. She listened with both hands around her mug, her dark eyes fixed on me as if attention itself could hold me together. When I finished, she said, "Layla, do you want this?" The question was so simple that I almost hated her for it. "He sounds nice," I said. That is not what I asked. Outside, people moved under umbrellas, faces tucked into collars. I said, "I am tired, Hannah. I am tired of being the reason everyone worries." Her expression changed into a tenderness I could barely bear. "You are not a problem to be solved," she said. I laughed too quickly, but she did not smile. She squeezed my fingers once, then let go before I could pull away. I did not cry. I had become very good at not crying in public, which is to say I had become very good at pretending my body was not where I lived. The weeks before the wedding passed with the dense unreality of weather before a storm. There were appointments, fabric samples, sweets ordered from Auntie's trusted women, guest numbers disguised as diplomacy, gold bangles lifted from velvet pouches and tried against my wrist. Everyone had an opinion about my dress, my hair, my skin, my posture, the way I held my eyes in photographs. I worked during the day, arranging type and color on a screen, making other people's messages clear while my own life became less legible. At night, I lay beneath a framed print of a blue doorway and tried to imagine Tariq's face. We had met twice with tea, with parents nearby, with both of us speaking the way people speak when every answer has an audience. He was handsome in a muted way, tall, well-dressed, with tired eyes and a careful smile. He asked about my work and seemed to listen, but there was a distance in him I recognized without understanding why. He never leaned toward me. He never looked at me with hunger or hope, or even curiosity. I told myself this was gentleness. I told myself love grew after marriage for many people. I told myself many things because there are few lies more persuasive than the ones that allow everyone else to remain happy. The wedding weekend began at a hired hall in North London, a place with mirrored walls, chandeliers pretending to be older than they were, and carpet patterned in gold swirls that made me feel faint if I looked down too long. The pre-wedding gathering was meant to be joyful and informal, which meant it was large enough for no one to hear themselves think, and formal enough for every woman to judge every seam. Food covered the long tables in fragrant abundance: rice jeweled with raisins, slow-cooked lamb, sambusas, bolani, salads bright with herbs, trays of fruit cut into shapes that made my cousins take pictures. The air was thick with perfume, cardamom, steam, and expectation. I was dressed beautifully. Everyone said so. My dress was a deep green that made my skin look warmer. The embroidery at the cuffs so fine my aunt had lifted my wrist and sighed. My makeup had been done by a woman who told me to relax my mouth, sweetheart, as if she could paint happiness over tension. People kept touching me. An aunt smoothed my sleeve. A cousin adjusted my necklace. My mother looked at me with pride so fierce it almost resembled fear. I smiled when required. I accepted compliments. Inside the dress, inside the gold and perfume and congratulations, I felt not ugly or ungrateful, but invisible, as if the person being celebrated had stepped away and left me to stand in her shape. Tariq's family arrived in clusters, his mother first, dignified and warm, then uncles, aunties, cousins, children darting beneath adult arms. Tariq came in beside his father, wearing a navy suit, his beard trimmed, his smile composed. He looked at me and nodded, and I felt again that strange absence, not rejection, not dislike, only the hollow politeness of someone arriving at an appointment. Then, when the room had already swallowed the new arrivals and turned them into noise, Soraya walked in last. I did not know her name yet. I only knew that the air changed because I noticed it in my body before I understood it in my mind. The door opened to a gust of rain-cooled air, and she stepped inside with her dark hair slightly wind-blown, a camel coat hanging open over a black dress too simple to ask for admiration, and too well cut not to receive it. She was not beautiful in the decorative way people praised at weddings. She was beautiful like a decision. There was silver at one temple, just a thread of it, and I remember wanting absurdly to draw it. She paused near the entrance, scanning the room, and I saw several relatives notice her and recalibrate themselves. Some smiled too brightly, some looked away. She took off her coat without hurry. She did not perform warmth. She was simply present, and presence, I learned that night, can be its own kind of rebellion. Tariq went to her with something like relief, and she touched his cheek with the back of her fingers. His older sister, someone whispered near me. Soraya, lives on her own, teaches at a university. The last phrase carried the faint weight families give to women who have built lives outside easy explanation. When Tariq brought her over, my mother straightened beside me. Soraya Haidari, he said. This is Layla Osman, my future wife. The words landed between us like an object neither of us wanted to pick up. Soraya extended her hand. Her grip was firm, warm, dry despite the rain. Her eyes were a dark hazel, green only when the light caught them, and they held mine for a fraction too long. Not rudely, not in any way I could have named then. It was simply that she looked at me as if looking was an act of attention, not a social habit. "Congratulations, Layla," she said. Her voice was low, composed, with the faintest roughness at the edge, as if she had spent the day lecturing and had not entirely recovered from it. "Thank you," I said. Her thumb shifted once against my knuckle before she let go. "You don't look like a woman who wants to be here," she did not say. But I heard it anyway, not as accusation, but as recognition. And recognition, when one has spent years avoiding mirrors, can feel almost violent. I looked away first. For the next hour, I was moved through the room by the gentle machinery of celebration. Women embraced me and said I was glowing. Men offered blessings. Children ran too close to the dessert table. Tariq stood beside me for photographs, careful not to touch more than necessary. Once across the room, I saw Soraya speaking to an elderly aunt. Her gaze lifted over the woman's shoulder and found me. Only for a second. Then it moved away. That second stayed with me longer than any compliment I received that evening. I escaped near 9 when the music had become too loud and my smile had begun to feel stitched to my face. There was a hallway behind the main room, narrow and overlit, leading to toilets, a cloakroom, and a window that overlooked the wet car park. I stood there with one hand on the sill and watched rain gather in the orange cones of the streetlights. My reflection in the glass looked like a bride from someone else's dream. Green dress, gold at the throat, eyes too large. I pressed my fingers beneath the edge of my necklace where it had begun to itch. Behind me, the door opened and closed, letting out a brief swell of voices before quiet returned. I knew before I turned that it was Soraya. I cannot tell you how I knew. Some awarenesses arrive ahead of evidence. She stopped a respectful distance away, holding 2 glasses of water. "I thought you might need this," she said. I accepted one. Our fingers did not touch, and somehow that felt more intimate than if they had. "Thank you. It is very loud in there." "Weddings often are," she said. "Families mistake volume for certainty." I laughed before I could stop myself, a small surprised sound that seemed to belong to the girl I had been before I learned caution. Soraya looked pleased but did not smile fully. For a moment we stood side by side, facing the rain. She asked, "Are you a graphic designer because you like order or because you like beauty?" Nobody had asked me anything like that all evening. My answer came slowly. "Both, maybe. Or because I like trying to make people feel something without telling them what to feel. That is not a small thing." "No, it doesn't always feel big, either. It feels like moving shapes around until something breathes." She turned her head toward me. "Do you draw outside work?" "I used to. Why did you stop?" I watched a raindrop split against the glass. Life got full. Soraya waited as if she had heard the door behind the sentence and knew there was another room inside it. I swallowed. Or maybe I stopped because drawing made it harder to lie to myself. Her gaze did not sharpen. She did not pounce on the confession. She only said, "Art is inconvenient that way." I looked at her then, truly looked, and saw that she was older than the women my mother considered marriageable, but not old in any way that suggested retreat. She seemed to belong to some age beyond permission. "You teach literature?" I asked. "Classical literature, mostly. Tragedy, exile, longing, people making disastrous choices because the world gives them too few honest ones. Sounds cheerful. It pays the mortgage." The corner of her mouth moved. I found myself wanting to make her do it again. Instead, she asked, "What do you read when nobody is telling you what you should read?" "Poetry sometimes. Essays, novels where not much happens except someone finally understands themselves." "Those are the novels where everything happens." I took a sip of water to hide the tremor that had entered me. The hallway smelled faintly of floor polish and wet wool. Behind the door, my future continued without me in bursts of laughter and drums. Soraya's shoulder was near mine, but not touching. "What are you afraid of, Layla?" she asked. Later, I would think about the audacity of that question, the way it should have felt intrusive from someone I had known less than 2 hours. It did not. It felt as if she had placed a bowl in front of me and I could choose what to pour into it. I gave a little laugh. Spiders. Driving on the motorway. My mother's disappointed silence. Soraya's face changed almost imperceptibly. That last one is common. Is it? Among daughters, yes. I looked down at my glass. I am afraid I will wake up one day and realize I have been very good and very loved and completely absent from my own life. There it was, more than I had meant to say. Shame rose in me immediately, hot and familiar. I turned toward the window as if the rain had asked for my attention. Soraya did not comfort me quickly. She did not say, "Don't be silly," or "It will be fine." She let the sentence live in the air with its full weight. Then she said, "That is a serious fear." The relief of being believed nearly undid me. Before she could say anything else, my cousin appeared at the end of the hallway, calling my name, bright with the panic of misplaced brides. "There you are. They're looking for you for pictures." Soraya stepped back. "Of course they are," she said quietly. I handed her my empty glass. When I returned to the hall, the lights seemed harsher, the music flatter, but somewhere beneath my ribs, a small, impossible warmth had begun. Not happiness, not hope, something less comfortable and more alive. The next 3 days were a blur of family events, each with its own language of obligation. There was lunch at Tariq's parents' house, where the women praised the rice and discussed seating with the seriousness of diplomats. There was an evening at my aunt's, where henna darkened on my palms, while girls sang, and older women cried at the correct moments. There were errands, fittings, prayers, adjustments, the endless choreography by which families turn private decisions into public inevitability. Through all of it, Soraya and I kept finding each other at the edges of rooms. Or perhaps I kept looking for edges because I knew she might be there. She stood slightly apart without seeming lonely, a book sometimes in her hand, a glass of tea cooling near her elbow, her attention moving quietly over people. She helped without announcing it. She carried trays, found safety pins, calmed a cousin's panic about seating, translated a joke for an older relative, then vanished before anyone could turn gratitude into possession. At Tariq's parents' house, I found her in the garden after lunch, beneath a leafless pear tree. She was smoking, which startled me. When she saw me, she looked at the cigarette with faint irritation, as if it had betrayed her. "A terrible habit resurrected by family gatherings," she said. "I should judge you." "You may. I have tenure. It makes me difficult to discipline." I smiled. She put the cigarette out after 2 drags and asked me to tell her something I had drawn and loved. I told her about a series of hands I had sketched at 19, hands on buses and in markets, hands counting change, holding books, braiding hair, peeling oranges. I liked hands because they gave people away. Soraya held up her own, amused. And mine? Long fingers. Ink stain near the thumb. Scar across the knuckle. "You notice too much." I noticed quietly. "There is a difference." "Yes," she said, and something in her voice made me look up. "There is." On the second day, when a florist confused the delivery times, Soraya offered to drive me because everyone else was busy deciding who to blame. In her car, the world changed. It was not that we escaped our families. Their voices still lived in my phone, buzzing every few minutes, and my wedding clothes hung like a future in the back seat. But London through Soraya's windscreen felt less like a map of duties, and more like a city, wet and layered and alive. We collected the flowers, and on the way back she turned down a side street and said there was a bookshop nearby she loved. "We have 15 minutes before anyone imagines catastrophe. I should get back." "You should," she agreed, and parked anyway. The shop was narrow, fogged at the windows, second-hand paperbacks stacked in tilting towers. The man behind the counter greeted Soraya by name. Of course he did. She bought me a slim collection of poems by a woman whose name I did not know. "For later," she said, when I protested. "Later when?" Later, when you remember that you are allowed to have a private life. Afterward, we had coffee in a small place with plants in the window and a woman behind the counter who wore silver rings on every finger. Nobody knew me there. Nobody looked at my face for bridal glow. Soraya asked about design as if it mattered why I chose certain colors, whether beauty could manipulate, whether a poster could tell the truth without raising its voice. I asked about her students, and she told me about a girl who had cried after reading Antigone because she understood that refusing could be an act of love. We did not speak of the wedding until my phone buzzed for the 5th time and my mother's name lit the screen. Soraya's eyes dropped to it, then lifted to mine. You can answer, I know. But for 1 second, I did not. For 1 second, I let the phone ring while the woman across from me watched without judgment. That tiny disobedience felt like stepping barefoot into cold sea. The wedding approached anyway. Of course it did. Desire, unnamed or not, has no legal power against guest lists and deposits. The night before, the hotel where many relatives stayed became a hive of sleepless women, misplaced earrings, garment bags, children refusing to settle, men pretending not to be emotional in the lobby. I shared a room with 2 cousins who fell asleep after midnight amid makeup palettes and phone chargers. I lay between their soft breathing and stared at the ceiling. Henna had darkened across my palms, intricate vines climbing toward my wrists. My dress hung on the wardrobe door, white and gold this time, heavy as weather. Tomorrow I would marry Tariq. The sentence had been said so often that it had lost meaning, and then, in the dark, meaning returned with teeth. I slid out of bed, wrapped myself in the hotel robe, and stepped into the corridor because panic, like grief, sometimes requires a change of air. At the far end, by the humming vending machine, Soraya stood in a dark robe, her hair loose around her shoulders, holding a paper cup of water she had not drunk. We both stopped. It was almost comical, the inevitability of it. Neither of you sleeps? She asked softly. I almost asked who she meant, then understood. Maybe no one sleeps before becoming a symbol. Her expression shifted. That is a better sentence than this corridor deserves. What are you doing awake? Being a coward about tomorrow's speech. Elder sister duty. I am expected to be wise, affectionate, and brief, all at once. Impossible. Entire civilizations have failed at less. She smiled then, truly, and the sight went through me with such sharp pleasure that I had to look away. After a moment, she said there was a small kitchen near the conference rooms. If we are going to be awake and tragic, we might as well have tea. The kitchen was narrow and stainless steel, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and toast. Soraya found mugs in a cupboard and tea bags in a plastic tub labeled for staff. I worried we were trespassing. She said, Layla, tomorrow you will be legally bound to a man you barely know in front of 200 people. Stealing hotel tea is not the moral crisis of the evening. I laughed, then covered my mouth because the laugh had come too close to a sob. She saw and did not hurry me. When the kettle began to rumble, she leaned back against the counter and said, I worried about this wedding. You did? Yes. Why? Because Tariq is my brother, and I love him, and he has been disappearing by inches for years. Because you are kind, and kindness is often mistaken for consent. Because everyone in both our families seems very pleased, and sometimes collective pleasure is the most dangerous sound in the world. My hands tightened around the counter. Tariq does not want this either, does he? Soraya closed her eyes briefly. I cannot speak for him. But no. I do not think he is ready to choose anyone, and certainly not while pretending choice has nothing to do with it. A strange relief moved through me, followed by sorrow. He has been kind. Kindness is not the same as presence. No. She poured the water. Steam rose between us. And you? She asked. Are you present in this? The kitchen seemed suddenly too bright. I wanted to lie. Instead, I looked at the tea darkening in the mug and said, I don't know how to be. Soraya's breath changed. Layla, My name in her mouth no longer sounded like a social fact. Her face had lost its composed distance. Without it, she looked tired and sad and so alive it hurt. You deserve to be chosen, she said, not assigned. It was the sentence my body had been waiting for without knowing language could hold it. I put one hand over my mouth. Soraya did not move toward me. That was her mercy. I whispered, "What if I don't know what I want because I was never meant to want anything?" "Wanting does not disappear because no one gives it permission," she said. "It waits." I thought of all the years I had felt something turn its face toward women, and then away again. All the moments I had folded into jokes, distractions, phases of weather. I said, "I feel as if I met you too late." She became very still. "No," she said after a moment. "Not too late, but terribly timed." The sentence opened something neither of us could close. We did not kiss, we did not even touch. But we stood in that stolen kitchen with tea cooling between us and looked at one another with the unbearable knowledge that something real existed, and that reality did not make it simple. When I returned to my room, my cousins were still asleep. I lay down with my hands beneath my cheek and watched morning gather around the curtains. I did not sleep. The wedding was beautiful. I can say that now without bitterness. Beauty is not proof of truth, and truth is not required for beauty to exist. The ceremony moved with the solemn grace our families had worked so hard to create. Women in silk and chiffon filled the front rows. Men adjusted cuffs and lowered their voices. My mother cried before anything had happened, because mothers know beginnings are also endings, even when they do not know which ones. The imam spoke gently. Tariq sat across from me, handsome, composed, remote. My dress was heavy. My henna looked almost black. Gold warmed my wrists. I could smell rose water, oud, pressed fabric, the faint dust of the carpet. When the vows came, I looked at Tariq's face and saw not cruelty, but absence. His eyes were open, his mouth formed the right words, but some essential part of him stood elsewhere, perhaps with someone whose name I did not know, perhaps simply in a room where he had been allowed to breathe. I felt, suddenly, a tenderness for him so piercing it almost resembled love. Not the love of a wife, no. The love of one prisoner recognizing another through the bars. We said what we were meant to say. People exhaled. Blessings rose around us. My mother kissed me and held my face in both hands as if trying to keep me from dissolving. Tariq's mother embraced me, her perfume powdery and kind. Tariq touched my shoulder lightly for a photograph, and his hand felt like a polite apology. At the reception that night, light glittered from glassware and sequins, music shook the floor, and plates arrived in endless procession. Everyone seemed relieved, which is the emotion people often mistake for joy after a difficult thing has been successfully performed. I sat beside Tariq at the main table and watched Soraya across the room. She wore deep blue now, her hair pinned low, silver earrings catching the light when she turned her head. She was doing her duty. She spoke to relatives, laughed at the correct moments, helped her mother with an elderly guest, lifted a small cousin onto a chair, accepted a compliment with a nod that gave nothing away. She did not look at me. That was the torture. Not looking can be more intimate than looking when both people know the effort required. Once she turned toward my table and her gaze passed over me as if I were part of the decoration. I felt the absence of her attention like a hand removed from my skin. Tariq leaned near me at one point and asked if I was all right. I said yes. He nodded, accepting the lie because it resembled his own. Later, when Soraya gave her speech, she stood with the microphone in both hands and spoke of Tariq as a boy who had once taken apart a radio to understand where music lived. People laughed. Tariq looked down. She spoke of families as gardens, of how care could not force bloom, only tend soil. It was a beautiful speech, and a dangerous one, though I think most people heard only the beauty. At the end, she lifted her glass to us. "May you both be given the courage to be honest with one another," she said. There was a second of silence before applause arrived. My mother's smile faltered, then returned. Tariq looked at his sister with something like gratitude and fear. I looked at my hands in my lap and felt the walls of my life shift, not enough to fall, but enough to warn me they were not eternal. Marriage, in its first weeks, was quieter than I expected. I had imagined misery as something loud, a locked room, tears in the bathroom, sharp words at midnight. Well, instead, it was polite. That was worse. Tariq and I moved into a flat in Stratford that his parents helped us find. A new building with pale floors, efficient heating, and a balcony overlooking other balconies. Our wedding gifts filled the living room. Dishes, towels, appliances, picture frames, all the equipment of a domestic life arriving before the life itself. We unpacked side by side like colleagues preparing an office. Tariq asked where I wanted the glasses. I asked whether he took sugar in tea. We learned each other's schedules. We sent thank you messages. We slept in the same bed for 4 nights, rigid with courtesy, before he began staying up late in the living room and I stopped pretending not to be relieved. He did not pressure me. He did not sulk. He was kind in the careful way people are kind when they are apologizing for a harm they have not yet admitted. In the mornings, he made coffee and left before I finished mine. In the evenings, we ate with the television on low because silence made the shape of our marriage too visible. When relatives visited, we performed. Tariq placed a hand lightly at my back. I poured tea. We smiled. After guests left, the room seemed to expand around us, emptied of witness. One night, 3 weeks after the wedding, I found Tariq on the balcony in the cold, phone in hand, not speaking. The glow lit his face from below. He looked younger than 30 and terribly tired. I stepped back before he saw me, but not before I caught the expression on his face. Love, yes, there was no other word. There was no love and grief and hunger restrained until it became pain. The next day, he asked if I wanted to go to dinner on Saturday. I said yes because wives said yes to dinners, and because I thought perhaps we could learn something kinder than avoidance. We sat in a Turkish restaurant near the station, surrounded by families and office workers, the table between us bright with grilled peppers and bread. Tariq talked about work. I talked about a branding project. We were pleasant. We were strangers with paperwork. Halfway through the meal, I realized I was watching a woman at another table laugh with her girlfriend, the ease with which their knees touched beneath the table, one hand resting briefly over the other near a glass of water. The sight entered my body before thought could censor it. Want moved through me, not abstractly, not as admiration, but as a physical ache so sudden I set down my fork. Tariq followed my gaze. His expression did not change much, but something softened in it, as if he recognized the direction of a locked door. He said nothing. Neither did I. That night I lay awake beside the careful distance between our bodies and understood, first in my muscles, then slowly in language, that I had never wanted what I had been given. I had wanted peace, approval, safety, my mother's untroubled sleep. But not this. Not a man's shoulder turned away in the dark, not the practiced future of pregnancy announcements and gentle resentments, not the slow erasure of my own pulse. The thing I had folded up and hidden years ago had a shape. It had a name. It had Soraya's voice saying, "Wanting does not disappear because no one gives it permission." For 2 days, I carried my phone as if it were something hot. I opened Soraya's contact and closed it again. I typed messages and deleted them. "Are you free? I need to talk. I don't know what is happening to me. None of them were sendable." On the 3rd evening, after Tariq texted that he would be late and the flat filled with the blue loneliness of early winter, I called her because I could not call anyone else. She answered on the 4th ring. "Layla?" Just my name, and I nearly broke. I stood in the kitchen, one hand gripping the counter. "I am sorry," I said immediately. "I should not be calling. Are you safe? Yes. Is he hurting you?" No, Tariq is not hurting me. He is barely here." Soraya was quiet. I heard a page turn, then the soft closing of a book. Where are you? At the flat. I hate that I call it that. The flat, as if it belongs to a life I am renting. My voice shook. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to be. I only know I am disappearing. She inhaled with care. Can you come here? The question stood between us with all its danger and mercy. Tonight. If you want to. I will not ask you to lie. I will not ask you to do anything. But you can come here and breathe for a while. I looked toward the hallway, toward Tariq's closed bedroom door, though he was not home. I thought of my mother. I thought of the hotel kitchen. I thought of myself at 40, still waiting for permission from people who loved me too much to see me clearly. I said, "Send me the address." The train to North London was crowded enough for anonymity. I stood near the doors with my coat buttoned to my throat, watching my reflection appear and vanish in the black glass as stations passed. Mile End, Bethnal Green, Liverpool Street. Then northward, the city changing its texture around me. I felt reckless, but not in the glamorous way of films. Recklessness, in real life, often feels like nausea. My phone buzzed once. Tariq. Late again. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, then typed back. Okay, be safe. A wife's message, a roommate's kindness, a lie with manners. Soraya lived on a quiet street lined with converted Victorian houses, their brick darkened by rain, bay windows glowing amber behind curtains. Her flat was on the first floor. I stood outside too long, looking at the brass buttons, my breath visible, my hands trembling inside my sleeves. When I pressed the bell, there was a pause, footsteps above, then the buzz of the door. The hallway smelled of old wood and someone's dinner. Soraya opened her door before I knocked. She wore black trousers, a gray jumper, no makeup, her hair loose and tucked behind one ear. Without the armor of family gatherings, she looked softer and more dangerous. The weight of everything we had not said was physical. It stood in the doorway with us. "Come in," she said. Her flat was warm, book-lined, lived in a way that made my chest ache. Shelves climbed the walls, arranged by some private logic of use and affection. There were framed prints, a worn blue rug, a desk beneath the window buried in papers, plants leaning toward winter light. On the mantel stood a photograph of Soraya, much younger, arm around a laughing woman whose face had been turned away from the camera. I saw it and then made myself not look. Soraya took my coat. "Tea or wine?" she asked. I almost laughed. That sounds like a diagnosis. It often is. "Wine," I said. She poured 2 glasses, and instead of the sofa, we ended up on the floor against the bookshelves, knees bent, the wine between us, the city humming beyond the windows. At first, we spoke about safe things because dangerous things require a runway. She asked about my work. I told her I had not drawn in weeks. She told me about a faculty meeting in which grown scholars had nearly come to war over a comma. I laughed, and the laugh loosened something. Then silence came, and this time, we let it. I looked at the spines beside my shoulder. Sappho, Woolf, Baldwin, Hafez, Morrison. So many lives arranged around us, so many ways of longing preserved and shelved. I said, "Did you always know?" Soraya did not ask what I meant. Yes and no. I knew what I felt before I knew what it meant. I knew girls made the world brighter in a way boys did not. But knowing inside yourself and having a life that can hold the knowing are different things. She told me about a woman at university named Layla, with an E, brilliant and impatient and terrible at cooking. They were not careful enough, or perhaps exhausted by care. A cousin saw them leaving a cinema holding hands, and by the time Soraya got home, the story had grown teeth. Her father shouted. Her mother cried as if Soraya had died. Her brothers protected the family name from a danger that looked exactly like her. Tariq was 15 and stood on the stairs saying nothing. "I do not blame him," she said. "He was a boy." She left 2 weeks later with 1 suitcase, £300, and a belief that freedom would feel cleaner than it did. It didn't? No. Freedom is still life. Rent, loneliness, grief, bad plumbing, missing your mother so badly you buy the same soap she used and then hate yourself for crying in the shower. The elegant woman beside me expanded to include a younger one carrying a suitcase through rain, terrified and stubborn, paying for truth with exile. Did they come around? Partly. Slowly. My father died before we learned how to speak honestly. My mother and I have a careful peace. Tariq knows more than anyone. He once visited me when I had flu and brought oranges because he remembered I liked them. She smiled faintly. He was a sweet boy. He still is, under all that fear. Why did you come back this weekend? Duty. Love. Curiosity. Masochism. She looked at me then. And because when Tariq told me he was getting married, something in his voice frightened me. I thought if I came, I might understand. And then there was you. My heart struck once, hard. I don't want to hurt him, I said. I know. I don't want to hurt my mother. I know. I don't want to be this person who walks into a family and breaks something. Layla, she said, the thing is already broken. You did not break it by noticing the cracks. Tears came then. I cried for my mother, for Tariq, for the girl I had been, for the life I had entered because I had not known how to refuse. Soraya did not gather me into her arms. Not yet. She sat beside me on the floor and stayed. That staying was its own embrace. When I could breathe again, she said, I will not tell you what to do. I wanted her to. I wanted this older, braver woman to hand me a map and absolve me of choosing. She refused me that mercy because it would not have been mercy. I can tell you only this. A life built to keep everyone comfortable except you will eventually make everyone suffer anyway. Truth hurts earlier. Lies hurt later and longer. You make it sound simple. No, I make it sound survivable. There is a difference. We talked until the city outside had gone quiet. She told me about years of loving women in rooms no relative entered, about privacy and its cost. I told her about drawing in the margins of school worksheets, about my mother's pride when I got into university and her suspicion when university made me harder to predict, about all the women I had admired too intensely and then converted into inspirations because inspiration was safer than desire. Soraya listened as if no part of me was excessive. At some point, the wine was gone. At some point, we moved closer without deciding to. My shoulder brushed hers. Neither of us moved away. The contact was small, almost nothing, and yet my entire body gathered around it. It asked nothing of performance. It asked only whether I was there. Near dawn, the sky behind the curtains became a pale, diluted blue. Soraya's head rested against the shelf behind us. Her eyes were tired. I looked at her hand on the rug between us, elegant fingers, scar across the knuckle, ink near the thumb again. The space between my hand and hers was no more than a few inches. It contained my marriage, my mother, my fear, every rule I had mistaken for God, every silence I had inherited, and every silence I had made myself. I reached across it. My fingertips touched the back of her hand. Soraya went still. Not because she was surprised by touch, I think, but because she understood the cost of it. Slowly, giving me every chance to retreat, she turned her hand palm up beneath mine. Our fingers fitted together with devastating simplicity. I made a sound I had no name for. Soraya looked at me then with an expression she had been keeping back for months, though months was impossible, because I had known her only days and not known her all my life. It held desire, yes, but also grief, restraint, tenderness, warning. Layla, she whispered, if you want me to stop this, say it now. I don't want you to stop. That was the first fully honest sentence my body and mouth had spoken together in years. She lifted her free hand to my face, not taking, only asking. When I leaned into her palm, her eyes closed for a second. Then she kissed me. The first kiss was not an explosion. Explosions destroy indiscriminately. This was slower, more searching, a door opening in a house I had thought was windowless. Her mouth was warm, careful at first, then less careful when I made another small sound and turned toward her. I had imagined, in the abstract way one imagines forbidden things, that kissing a woman would feel like crossing a line. It felt instead like returning to my own skin. Soraya tasted faintly of wine and tea. Her fingers trembled once against my cheek. That tremor undid me more than confidence would have. It told me she was not above danger, not untouched by wanting, not merely guiding me through my own awakening from some safe distance. She was there with me. When we broke apart, our foreheads rested together. Neither of us spoke. Speech would have made promises too quickly. So we breathed. We chose the next kiss with our eyes open. After that, time altered. I will not pretend those hours were simple because they were beautiful. They were beautiful because they were not simple. There was guilt, yes, sharp and returning. There was fear. There was Tariq's kindness like a hand at my shoulder, my mother's face in the kitchen, the knowledge that every tenderness might become evidence in someone else's accusation. But there was also Soraya's hand at my waist, steady and reverent, her mouth against my hair, the low murmur of my name as if she were learning it by touch. There was the astonishment of wanting without disappearing. When she held me, I did not feel consumed. I felt outlined. We moved from the floor only when our bodies ached, and even then, we did not rush toward anything. Soraya made tea because dawn had become morning, and reality had not dissolved. We stood in her kitchen barefoot, wrapped in the hush that follows honesty. She touched my wrist where the henna had begun to fade at the edges. I should regret this, I said. Do you? I thought carefully. I regret the harm around it. I do not regret knowing. Her eyes shone. Good. Later, when tiredness finally took us, we lay on her bed fully clothed at first, then less armored by layers, but still held by gentleness, by the solemnity of two women who understood that desire could be both flame and shelter. Soraya asked before every closeness became closer. I answered not because she demanded permission like a formality, but because my yes mattered to her. That was new. To have my yes treated as alive, renewable, sacred. In the warm dimness of her room, with rain tapping the window and books stacked on the bedside table, I learned that passion did not have to be a storm one endured. It could be a language. It could be patient and hungry at once. It could make room for laughter, for tears, for stillness afterward when she held me and said nothing because nothing needed rescuing. I slept for 2 hours with my face near her collarbone and woke to winter light on the ceiling. For a few seconds, I did not remember the world. Then I did, and grief entered with it. Soraya was awake, watching the light. I have to go back, I said. I know. Her voice was rough with sleep. What are we doing? Something honest in a dishonest situation. That is not enough. No, it is not. We lay there with the terrible dignity of that truth. Then she said, "You need to speak to Tariq before you come here again." Not because I don't want you. Her mouth tightened around the understatement. I want you more than is sensible. But because I will not be the room where you hide from your life. The words hurt. They also made me love her, though I did not say love then. Love was too large to introduce while I still wore another person's ring. I nodded. On the train back, my body carried Soraya's warmth beneath my clothes, and my mind carried the work ahead like a sentence. The flat in Stratford looked unchanged when I entered. Pale floors, unopened gifts, a bowl of fruit on the counter, Tariq's shoes by the door. He was in the living room, still in yesterday's shirt, dark circles beneath his eyes. He looked at me, at my overnight absence, at the scarf tied too hastily around my neck. Before continuing, if you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. For a moment, neither of us pretended. Then he said, "We should talk." "Yes," I said. We sat at the kitchen table because the sofa felt too intimate and the bedroom unthinkable. Morning light exposed everything without drama. Tariq folded his hands around a mug of coffee he did not drink. I had prepared speeches on the train, explanations that protected Soraya, apologies that took responsibility without confessing too much, careful sentences about incompatibility. In the end, the truth came differently. I said, "I am sorry. I should not have said yes to this." He closed his eyes. Relief crossed his face so quickly I might have missed it if I had not been looking. I shouldn't have either. The words left him like air from a wound. We sat in the quiet after them. He rubbed both hands over his face. My parents wanted this so badly. Mine too. I thought maybe kindness would be enough, I said. Tariq gave a small, humorless laugh. I thought duty would eventually become a personality. That startled a laugh out of me, then tears. He looked at them with alarm, but I shook my head. "I'm all right." "No," he said gently. "Neither of us is. There are conversations that become possible only when both people stop guarding the same lie." Slowly, haltingly, we told each other enough. I did not give him Soraya's name. Not then. I said there was someone who made me understand myself, and his expression flickered in a way that told me he already knew more than I had said. He told me about Elias, though at first he only said he. A man he had met at university, loved for 6 years in fragments, lost, found again, hidden, lost again. A man whose messages still lived under a false name in his phone. Tariq spoke without self-pity. That made it sadder. He had believed marriage would cure him of longing, or at least bury it beneath responsibilities. Instead, he said, it had made him cruel in a new way. Not to me, maybe, not visibly, but to himself, to Elias, to the truth. I reached across the table and touched his hand. It was the first time I had touched him with real tenderness. Not marital tenderness, not the kind our families had imagined, but human tenderness, the kind one trapped person offers another when a door appears. He squeezed my fingers once and let go. "What do we do?" he asked. "We tell them, not everything, not everyone, but enough to end this." He laughed again, a little broken. "You make that sound survivable. Someone said something similar to me." He looked at me then, and I saw it land. "Soraya?" My face must have answered before I did. Tariq leaned back. There was pain in his expression. Yes, but not shock. "Of course," he said softly. "Of course it would be her." "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't make her a betrayal. This began before her. Maybe before both of us were born." He looked toward the window. "My sister has spent her whole life paying for being honest. If she helped you find words, that is not the worst thing she could have done." I cried then, not loudly, but with gratitude so fierce it hurt. Tariq looked away to give me privacy. We planned like adults because drama would have been easier and less useful. We would tell our parents the marriage was not working, that we had rushed, that we respected each other but could not continue as husband and wife. We would separate quickly. Legal matters would follow. We would not accuse. We would not offer details for relatives to turn into weapons. We would protect each other where we could, and tell the truth where silence became harm. It sounded almost clean when arranged in sentences. It was not clean. Nothing involving mothers is clean. Tariq told his parents first, with Soraya present at his request. I was not there, but he called afterward with a voice like someone speaking from rubble. His mother had cried. His father had gone very quiet. There had been anger, questions, disbelief, the frantic bargaining of people watching the story they had told themselves catch fire. Soraya, he said, had sat beside him and refused to let anyone call him selfish. Then came my mother. I went to her house on a Sunday afternoon when the sky was low and white and my father was at work. I chose a time when my brothers would not be there because courage has limits and mine was already shaking. My mother was making shah, cardamom, and cloves warming the kitchen. For a terrible second, I wanted to say nothing, to sit at the table and let her feed me, to be her good daughter for one more hour. She looked pleased when I arrived, then concerned. "You are too thin," she said immediately. "Marriage is not a diet." The joke was small and motherly and devastating. I took off my coat. "Huyo," I said, and the word turned me into a child. What happened? I had planned to begin gently, but there is no gentle way to move a life. I said, "Tarek and I are separating." The room changed. The kettle still hissed. Rain ticked against the back window. But my mother's face closed and opened and closed again, as if she were trying to understand a language she had never consented to learn. "Separating," she repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means we cannot stay married. It has been weeks." "Layla, marriage is not a dress you return because the color is wrong." Shame moved through me, old and automatic. I forced myself not to lower my eyes. "I know." "Then what is this? Did he hurt you?" "No." "Did his family disrespect you?" "No." "Then what?" "We were wrong for each other. We both knew it. We should not have gone through with it." My mother laughed once, sharp with disbelief. "Wrong for each other. You knew him 5 minutes before you married him. How can you know wrong so quickly?" I wanted to say, "How could I know right?" But I did not. She gripped the counter. "People will talk. They will say we forced you. They will say something is wrong with you. They will say, I did not raise you properly." There it was, the chorus behind her voice, the social world in which a daughter's choices could be read as a mother's failure. I stepped closer. "You did raise me properly. You raised me to be honest. You—" Her eyes flashed. "Do not use honesty like a knife against me." The words struck because they were not entirely unfair. "Truth can cut even when it must be spoken." I said, "I am not trying to hurt you. You are hurting me anyway." "Yes," I whispered. "I know." That was when she began to cry. My mother cried with resistance, one hand over her mouth, anger and grief fighting for the same breath. Every cell in me wanted to kneel, put my head in her lap, take it back, be small enough for her love again. Instead, I stood where I was because love that requires self-erasure is still love, but it is not safety. She said, "Was I so terrible to you?" The question broke me. "No, Huyo, no. You loved me. You love me. That is why this is hard." "Then why?" "Because I cannot live the life everyone planned for me. Because I said yes when I meant I am scared. Because I thought being a good daughter meant never asking what kind of woman I was becoming. Because there are things about me I buried so deep I almost became the grave." She looked at me then, truly looked, and some part of her understood enough to be frightened. What things? I could have softened it beyond recognition, but half-truths had built the room we were standing in. "I owed us a door," I said. "I don't think I can love a man the way a wife should." My mother's hand lowered from her mouth. Silence entered like winter. She whispered, "Astagfirullah," not as performance, but as reflex, a word reaching for the floor beneath her. I flinched. She saw and seemed to flinch from my flinch. "Are you saying you are like those people?" It hurt more because she did not say it with hatred. She said it with terror, as if I had stepped into a road and she could see a car coming. "I am saying I am your daughter," I said. "I am the same person who sat at this table yesterday. I am saying I cannot be married to Tariq and survive as myself." She turned away, both hands on the counter. "You think survival is only yours? What about mine? What about your father? What about the family? What about all the sacrifices?" There it was again, the ledger of love. I had been entered into it before I could write my own name. "I know you sacrificed," I said. "I carry it every day. But I cannot repay you by disappearing." "This is England talking," she said. "Your work, your friends, all these ideas. You think freedom is doing whatever your heart says. Hearts are foolish. Hearts destroy homes. Sometimes homes destroy hearts, I said softly. She turned back with such pain that I hated myself for the sentence, even as I knew it was true. She asked if there was someone. I could not answer quickly enough. Who? I shook my head. I will not give you a name to blame. So there is. This is why. No, I said, stronger now. This is not why. This is what helped me stop lying, but it is not the cause. The cause is that I have been afraid my whole life. The cause is that Tariq and I were both used to make a picture neither of us could live inside. My mother sank into a chair, suddenly older, wounded in a place I could not bandage. I sat across from her because leaving would have been easier than staying. For a long time, she did not look at me. I don't know how to understand this, she said. I know. I don't know how to be happy about it. I know. I am angry with you. I know. Are you ashamed? Of you? Of yourself. Years of training rose in me, eager to answer for survival. I placed both hands flat on the table so she could see they were shaking. I have been, I said. For a long time. I don't want to be anymore. My mother closed her eyes. Tears moved down her cheeks unchecked. I did not reach for her. For once, I would not use comfort to erase what I had said. We sat there until the tea went cold. When I left, she did not kiss me. She did not curse me either. At the door, she said, I need time. It was not acceptance. It was not rejection. It was a door left neither open nor closed. I walked to the bus stop in the rain and cried so hard an elderly woman offered me a tissue without asking why. In the weeks that followed, my life became smaller in the visible ways. News traveled, not accurately, but efficiently. Some aunties called with concern sharpened into interrogation. Some did not call at all. My father spoke to me gently, bewildered, asking if I was safe, if I needed money, if this was truly what I wanted. He did not understand, but he did not try to crush what he did not understand. My brothers were awkward, one angry, one silent, both waiting to see what version of family would be permitted now. Hannah came over with groceries and said, I am proud of you, then cried when I cried. Tariq moved out first, and later, I heard, to a place near Elias. He and I met twice to handle practicalities, and the tenderness between us grew easier because it no longer had to pretend to be romance. We protected each other in public. We told relatives there had been mutual misunderstanding, too much pressure, no blame. People wanted blame anyway. Blame is simpler than grief. Soraya and I moved carefully. Not secretly exactly, but with the discipline of people who knew that honesty did not require spectacle. For a month after I told my mother, I did not stay the night. I went to Soraya's flat in afternoons or evenings, carrying a change of clothes I did not use, and we talked, kissed, cooked, argued gently about poems, learned the daily textures of each other. Desire remained, deepening rather than fading, but it no longer had to prove itself by urgency. Sometimes we failed at restraint and ended up breathless against the kitchen counter while pasta water steamed the windows. Sometimes we sat at opposite ends of the sofa reading, our feet touching under a blanket, and I thought the quiet would undo me. Soraya had habits I came to love with embarrassing intensity. She annotated books with a fountain pen, but wrote shopping lists on envelopes. She forgot to eat when grading essays. She sang under her breath only when chopping herbs. She argued with radio presenters. She kept oranges in a blue bowl because Tariq had once brought them when she was ill, and now they meant being remembered. She was not always composed. She could be irritable when tired, remote when afraid, too quick to retreat into intellect when feeling threatened. Once, after a difficult phone call with her mother, she went so silent I felt abandoned beside her. I told her so badly. She looked stricken, then defensive, then took a breath and said, I learned distance before I learned repair. I am trying. That sentence became a covenant between us. We were grown women carrying families, languages, duties, old strategies of survival. Love did not make us innocent. It made us responsible. My mother did not speak to me for 19 days. On the 20th day, she called and asked whether I had eaten. She did not mention Tariq or what I had told her, but she asked about work, and when I said I was designing again, properly designing, she made a small sound that might have been approval or grief. Over the next months, our relationship became a careful path across unstable ground. Sometimes, my mother sent pictures of food she had made or asked if I needed a winter coat. Sometimes, she became cold, without warning, injured anew by a thought I could not see. Once she said, "I had dreams for you," and I said, "I know, but I need to dream too." She hung up soon after. 3 days later, she sent a message. "Your father says your logo for the community center is good. Very clean." I laughed until I cried because my mother had found a way to praise me from behind him. Reconciliation did not arrive like a film. There were crumbs, a phone call, a recipe, a warning to wear socks, a refusal to ask, and a refusal to disappear. I learned to accept small mercies without shrinking my truth to earn them. Our first night together after I had moved out properly came in late February, after rain had left the streets shining. I arrived at Soraya's flat carrying pajamas, a toothbrush, and the poetry book she had bought me during the wedding weekend. Soraya opened the door and looked at the bag, then at me. "Staying?" she asked. "If that is still all right." Her face softened with such unguarded joy that I almost looked away. "It is more than all right." That night, we cooked lentil soup with too much cumin because I knocked the jar with my elbow while she was kissing the back of my neck. Later, in her bedroom, nothing felt stolen. Still complicated, yes, still ringed by consequence, but no longer stolen from a sleeping husband or a life I refused to face. Soraya asked if I was afraid. I said yes. She said she was too. We laughed softly because honesty had become familiar enough to hold humor. When she kissed me, there was heat in it, undeniable and grown, but also patience. We had time now, not infinite, not simple, but time we had chosen. She touched me as if learning a beloved text, attentive to rhythm, silence, breath. There were moments when the world narrowed to the press of her mouth against my shoulder, the curve of her back beneath my hand, the low sound she made when I said her name without fear. Soraya held me afterward, and I listened to her heartbeat with the astonishment of someone hearing proof. In the morning, she made tea wearing my old t-shirt, and I stood in the kitchen doorway wrapped in a blanket, watching steam rise between us. I thought, this is not escape. Escape is frantic. This is arrival, and arrival, I was learning, could be quiet. Spring came slowly. London softened at the edges. Plane trees budded along streets that had looked dead for months. Markets brightened, and people sat outside cafes in coats, insisting on warmth before it had fully arrived. My work changed. At first, I thought only my mood had improved, but then clients noticed. Hannah noticed. "You are using color again," she said one evening, peering at my laptop while eating crisps on my bed. I had not realized I had stopped. I drew hands again. Hands opening curtains, turning pages, kneading dough, gripping train poles, resting on other hands in secret and in daylight. I drew a blue doorway and did not know until I finished that it resembled the print in my childhood bedroom and the door to Soraya's flat at once. When the design was accepted, I called my mother before I called Soraya. Some part of me still wanted my first joy to know the way home. My mother answered while shopping. I told her. She said, "Mashallah, very good." Then, after a pause, "Are you sleeping enough?" "Yes." "Are you eating proper food?" "Yes, Huyo. Not only cafe food." "Not only cafe food." Another pause. "Your aunt saw Tariq's mother at the butcher. She says Tariq is living in South London now." "He is well?" "I think so." "Good," she said. "He was a nice boy." "Yes, he was." A silence then. Not empty, but full. My mother said, "Nice is not always enough." I closed my eyes. No, it isn't. She changed the subject immediately, but the sentence stayed between us like the first green thing after frost. Soraya's family shifted too. Tariq began visiting her more often, sometimes with Elias waiting downstairs, sometimes eventually bringing him up for tea. The first time I met Elias, he looked as terrified as I felt. A tall man with kind eyes and a nervous habit of twisting his ring. Soraya, who had once been the family's warning story, became an unlikely shelter for both of us. This amused her and angered her depending on the day. I did not fight this hard to become a queer community center for emotionally constipated relatives, she said once after Tariq left. Then she packed him leftovers because irritation had never stopped her from feeding people. Her mother did not speak of me directly for months, but she sent food through Tariq and once included a jar of pickled vegetables Soraya loved with a note that said, "For your guest." Soraya read it 3 times, eyes wet, then pretended she was not crying by reorganizing the fridge. Families, I learned, rarely transform in clean lines. They bend, stiffen, crack, heal oddly, grow around wounds like trees around metal. Some wounds remain, some become part of the grain. There were still hard days. Shame returned without invitation. Soraya withdrew sometimes because loving me reopened rooms in her own history she thought she had sealed. There were forms, solicitors, relatives who asked questions in grocery aisles, wedding photos left online because nobody knew whether deleting them was more scandalous than leaving them. There were nights when I missed my family with a child's helplessness, though they were a short bus ride away. Soraya never told me grief meant I had chosen wrongly. She never used my sadness as evidence against my freedom. Once, after a strained dinner at my parents' house, I sat on her bathroom floor and said, "Maybe I have ruined everything." She sat opposite me and said, "You have changed everything. Ruin is a story frightened people tell about change." Some days I believed her. Some days belief came later, after tea, after sleep, after her hand found mine under the table. By summer, my legal marriage to Tariq had become paperwork nearing conclusion, and my real life had become a series of ordinary devotions. Soraya and I shopped for groceries on Saturday mornings at a market where she was very serious about tomatoes. We argued about whether my plants died because I overwatered them, or because they sensed my uncertainty. On a rainy Sunday, she took me to her university office because she had forgotten papers. The campus was almost empty, stone buildings dark with weather. Her office was small and chaotic, books piled on chairs, essays in precarious stacks, a plant clinging to life through what I considered neglect, and she called independence. I sat in her chair and imagined her there before me, year after year, teaching longing in rooms where she had to hide the shape of her own. On the wall was a postcard reproduction of a fragment attributed to Sappho. "Someone will remember us," I read. "Do you believe that?" She leaned against the desk. "Some days. Other days I think being remembered is less important than having lived accurately enough that memory is not required." "Accurately?" I repeated. She smiled. "It is not a romantic word. It is to me." She came around the desk and kissed me there, in the room where she had made a life from language, and the kiss carried no urgency to hide. Rain tapped the old window. I touched the silver at her temple, finally, after wanting to since the first night. She let me. The gesture reached back to the woman across the wedding hall and told her she had been right to notice. The hardest piece came with my mother in August. She asked me to come for lunch on a day so hot the city seemed to breathe through cloth. I went alone because she had not invited Soraya, and I would not force a meeting before any of us could survive it. My father was there, and my younger brother, and the meal was almost normal. We ate baris and salad. My mother scolded my brother for drinking straight from the bottle. My father asked about work, and nobody mentioned divorce, women, Tariq, or shame. After lunch, while the men watched football too loudly in the front room, my mother and I washed dishes together. This had been our old choreography. She washed, I dried, or I washed, and she corrected my drying. For a while, we let the water speak. Then she said, "Are you still seeing that person?" My hands tightened around a plate. "Yes." She nodded as if I had confirmed the weather. "Is she good to you?" I looked at her profile, the familiar slope of her nose, the tiredness near her eyes. "Yes," I said. "She is." My mother scrubbed a pot already clean. "Does she make you forget your family?" The question held accusation, fear, pleading. "No," I said. "Nothing could make me forget you." She breathed out. "I don't want to know details. I know. Not now. Maybe not ever." "I understand." She looked at me then, and her eyes were wet but steady. "I am trying to understand what I can." The sentence was not enough for the girl I had been, who had wanted a mother to open her arms and say all of you is welcome. But it was not nothing. From my mother, raised in her own rooms of fear and duty, it was a plank laid over deep water. I set down the towel. I wanted to hug her and feared refusal. She saw the hesitation. Annoyed almost, she clicked her tongue. "Come here, then." I went to her. She held me stiffly at first, then hard enough to hurt. I smelled onions in her clothes, rose soap, the skin of my childhood. When she pulled away, she cupped my face in the old way, the way she had on my wedding day. But now her gaze held something more difficult than pride. "You are still my daughter," she said. "I know," I whispered, though I had not known until she said it. She wiped my cheek with her thumb. "Do not make me meet anyone yet." I laughed through tears. "I won't. And eat more. You look thin." "I am not thin, Huyo. You are thinner than my worry prefers." That was as close to blessing as the day could offer. I took it. On the morning I knew this most clearly, autumn had returned to London. Soraya's flat was full of pale light, the kind that makes dust visible and ordinary objects look briefly chosen. I woke before her and slipped from bed, pulling on a sweater and thick socks because her old windows let in drafts she romantically called character. In the kitchen, I made tea the way she liked it, strong but not brutal, with a little milk, no sugar. Love, I found, often lived in such precision. The remembered bitterness, the warmed mug, the orange placed in the blue bowl before she noticed we were out. On the table lay a stack of essays, my sketchbook, 2 slices of toast cooling because I always misjudged timing, and the poetry book from the wedding weekend, its spine creased, its margins crowded with my handwriting. Soraya came in wearing her glasses and the old blue robe I had once mocked until she threatened to assign me medieval allegory as punishment. Her hair was sleep mussed, silver bright at the temple. She looked nothing like the untouchable woman who had walked into the hired hall in a coat too good for the occasion. She looked better. She looked real. "Morning?" she said, voice low with sleep. "Morning." She kissed my cheek on her way to the kettle, then noticed the tea already made and turned back with theatrical suspicion. "Are you trying to seduce me with competence? Is it working?" "Unfortunately, yes." She sat at the kitchen table and opened a book, one hand reaching absently for the mug. Outside, a bus sighed at the corner. Rain threatened but had not yet begun. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "I made too much soup. Come tomorrow if you want. Bring your containers." It did not say, "Bring Soraya." It did not say, "Don't." A space had opened, small but real. I showed the message to Soraya. She read it and placed her hand over mine. "Soup diplomacy," she said. "Very advanced stage." I smiled. My eyes stung. She squeezed my fingers and returned to her book, giving me room to feel without being watched. I opened my sketchbook. On the page was a drawing I had begun the night before. A woman at a kitchen table, reading in morning light, one hand around a mug, the world unperformed around her. I added the line of Soraya's shoulder, the curve of her bent head, the slight furrow between her brows when a sentence displeased her. She looked up and caught me drawing. "I thought you only drew hands," she said. I draw what gives people away. And what am I giving away? I studied her, this woman who had not rescued me, not taken me from my life, not healed me by magic or passion or certainty, but had offered me truth, warmth, and the frightening dignity of choice. "You are happy," I said. The words surprised us both. Soraya looked down at her book. Her mouth trembled before she steadied it. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." The rain began then, softly at first, touching the window in small dark beads. I thought of the hotel hallway, the kitchen at 2 in the morning, the first tea we had not drunk. I thought of Tariq somewhere across the city, perhaps waking beside the person he loved, perhaps still learning courage in his own time. I thought of my mother stirring soup and making too much because feeding me was the language she trusted when all others failed. I thought of the girl I had been, saying yes with her mouth while something in her chest went quiet. And I wanted to reach back to her, not to scold her, but to take her hand and say, "Wait, wanting waits, but not forever." There will be a door. There will be rain. There will be a woman who looks at you as if you are not a problem, but a person. There will be pain, yes, and you will think it is ending you, but it is only ending the life that could not hold you. I closed the sketchbook and went to Soraya. She pushed her chair back without a word, making room for me between her knees. I bent and kissed her, slowly, in the morning kitchen, with tea cooling and rain beginning, and my mother's message glowing on the table. Her hands settled at my waist, warm and certain. I had spent so long believing love would arrive as rescue, permission, a dramatic door flung open by someone braver than me. But love, real love, had arrived as attention, as a question in a hallway, as tea stolen from a hotel kitchen, as truth told without demand, as a hand turned palm up on a blue rug. As soup, perhaps, waiting in my mother's house. As the ordinary courage of waking each day inside a life I had chosen and choosing it again. I kissed Soraya once more, and when I drew back, the quiet inside me was no longer the silence of surrender. It was the quiet of arrival.